Oh, hi. So basically, what I've been doing is I've been playing a lot of Civilization 4, and overall, compared to the latter games and the previous games, you could say this one's kind of it's stat heavy. There's a lot of options for customization, and mods have just endless fun with this system. The engine, everything's very easy to mess around with, and I find myself pulled towards mods that have a lot of features and are very complicated, and sometimes you realize there's too many features or there's too many mods or you have like 1,000 units and the program refuses to run and you get all the units confused with one another, so you kind of have to find like a healthy balance between having not enough units and having too many. But it's been really interesting just to mess around with everything. And to kind of start a topic, what I realized is there's a wide variety of different ways that nations could theoretically be run that are not presented or shown in the original game per se. I mean, they kind of are, but not really to a wide degree. What I'm basically trying to say is there's not enough detail. There could be more flexibility, which is why I was more interested in a lot of the modifications that kind of increase that flexibility, but not too much. Because if there's like 1,000 different governments you could set up, then that just makes everything too complicated. So I've seen a very interesting video. I don't exactly remember what it was, but I kind of memorized almost all the details. And basically, it argued that theoretically there is 5 systems of government that are theoretically possible, but technically speaking, 2 of them do not count. So those would be anarchy, democracy, republics, oligarchies, and dictatorships slash despotism. And technically speaking, anarchy and despotism don't count because anarchy is theoretically not a government system. And once a country enters anarchy, it quickly chooses another government system very quickly because people just don't enjoy anarchy. For example, anarchy to a degree was the reason why Hitler gained power, why the guy in Italy seized power, Mussolini, why what happened in Spain happened with their own dictator. Basically, all dictators come to power by creating a state of anarchy and then just seizing power during that period of anarchy. But theoretically, revolutions could also cause that state of problems and then lead to democracy, which then could lead to any other number of systems. It really depends. Good example is that technically America started off as a oligarchy and kind of just worked its way down to a republic, then democracy, then a oligarchy again. So it's kind of hard to explain. A good example of this would probably be Greece. Greece would start off to a degree as a republic. Each city state and technically the nation, it depends on the historical period. But basically, they start off as a republic. Then they would decentralize their government, remove regulations, and the people gain a lot of power. But then democracy would set in, and that would eventually would turn to mob rule, which would more or less become anarchy. And because of all that mob rule and all that chaos, eventually a dictatorship would seize control. But that dictatorship would technically just be an oligarchy because the man in charge would be put in power by a group of people that had lots of power. So, like the landowning class would make a king, and then the king would lose power, and the landowning class would have power, and then people would start voting, and there would be a republic, and then there would be a democracy, and then a kingdom, and then a republic, and then democracy, and then kingdom, republic, democracy, kingdom, republic, democracy, kingdom, and that's a cycle. So, what I'm basically trying to tell you is that anarchy is impossible. Behind every single powerful leader, there is a group of people who give them their power. So, technically speaking, they do not rule with complete and total control. For example, Hitler was surrounded by a group of people who had power, the Nazi Party. He had ministers who had power. The guy who led the SS had power. The guy who led the army had power, and he was able to maintain his power unless these people were on his side, which they were, which is why he maintained power for so long. Now, of course, if they changed their mind, decide they didn't want him anymore, they could theoretically get rid of them. Stalin, to degree, is the same, more or less, box. He did the same thing to gain power, and he basically killed everyone who had power besides him, which is why he maintained power. So, technically speaking, he is one of the few exceptions where the person in charge or the government is not actually an oligarchy pretending to be a stronger or weaker system of government. but that's like an outlier in the system. Well, technically speaking, republics have constitutions and democracies don't, which is why republics are much more stable. But the problem is that, according to some people, republics could theoretically be very, very strong governments that have lots of power and control, and their prime majority reason for existing is to basically provide people security, stability, and to more or less preserve their rights, but kind of at the price of some of those rights. So basically, like World War II America, where people had some degree of freedom, but not as much as they should theoretically have.